and so hello, listeners. All right, welcome again for tuning in and supporting Co-op Radio, your independent alternative grassroots radio. We are probably still in our spring membership drive, or even if we are not, feel free to throw us a little bit of money, your pocket change. I know it's really difficult these times, but this is one of the ways that you can support independent journalism. And speaking of that, we are joined now with freelance journalist Hameed Umucyaba, I hope, and he will correct my pronunciation, who is based at the moment in Hong Kong. Thank you. And has written quite a number of articles on a wide variety of themes and topics of interest to me. And for the last little while, I've been following his work. And we've asked him to join us today to talk about 3 articles that have recently appeared that he has investigated and reported on. And so I'd like to, first of all, Martar, just welcome you to the program. This is the first time that we're connecting, and thank you for your work, and thank you for making the time to join us.
Yes. I've been waiting to have this interview with you. I know you've had it prepared for a while. Things have gotten in the way, but it's very good to finally be on, finally be able to speak on the topics that I write about.
Thank you so much. So let's jump right into it. One of the things that did catch our attention, for those who are on the left that are paying attention, is the whole business about what to do around the Palestinian protests that have been, popping up all over the country, and it's seemingly getting even more momentum now that campuses are in the mix. But a couple of articles that stood out for me was one of them in, I guess, was it with Warren Kinsella and the War Measures Act, a call for the War Measures Act to be brought down on pro-Palestinian protesters. And another one, which is related, was how the Canadian state apparatus conspires with Zionist vigilantes to dox and spy on pro-Palestinian community. So maybe we can start with the doxing first. Can you tell us a little bit about this? Give us the context and share with us what your research led you to.
Oh, yes. So the victim, Tara, she was a Palestinian protester, pro-Palestine protester, and a new convert to Islam. And she was a single mother, and before she converted to Islam, she had a past that she was trying to hide. But as soon as she started advocating for Palestine, the radical Zionists, particularly the Kahanists, represented by Israel Now and Mayor Weinstein, a known member of a Kahanist, like a former member of the Kahanist Jewish Defense League, which is actually a registered terrorist organization in the United States, used their infrastructure to find as much information about her as they could. And they started doxing her. They threatened to reveal very sensitive information about her, and they acted on it after the article was released, actually, unfortunately.
Sorry, so just backtrack. So the Jewish Defense League is an American-based organization that also has a chapter, or did have chapters in Canada, but I don't think they officially exist in Canada, yeah? And what was the connection between them and the article again?
Well, so you end up finding out that because of their military-like organization, their militant-like organization, they connect themselves and they build themselves a security infrastructure, okay. And they also associate themselves with the Toronto police, basically the GTA. So they're involved with the York Region Police and the Toronto Police, and it looks like Mayor Weinstein has close connections. If you find with the police, and also Shomrim themselves have their own. They have their own patrol cars, and they look like police cars. They actually have the same Fords that they use as part of their police cars. Like they have like a neighborhood watch called Shomrim.
Okay.
And yeah. So what was interesting was that all of the information that they had uncovered about Tara had already been deleted everywhere. But they uncovered it and then found some very compromising photos of her, and then they posted it right after she had interviewed me, and the article was published, as they were following through on a thread given by a doctor who was also a co-founder of Israel Now. So Israel Now, there's a doctor in Texas named Gary Branfman. So as you can see, the Zionists in the U.S. and Canada, they work together and they coordinate. And Gary Branfman had made threats to her via an email. Now, I don't want to get too personal about what the threat was to her, because I don't want to really bring too much attention to her, what they were threatening her with, in order to kind of preserve her dignity and her honor. But basically the crux of the point that I'm trying to make is, through this article, is that they seem to be able to spy extensively on their opponents. Oh, excuse me about that. So they're able to spy on their opponents, and they're able to uncover a lot of compromising information about them. And Tara is a good and important case. And pro-Palestine protesters will have to think about what this means for them personally when they go out and protest. Whether they choose to be intimidated by it, whether they stand up to it. But it also lets you know how far they're willing to go and how much worse it can get advocating for Palestine.
Can you tell us more about what you know more about Israel Now?
So Israel Now is basically... Israel Now is... do you still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So Israel Now is... It's founded by Meir Weinstein, and it's founded by Gary Branfman. So Gary Branfman is the one that sent the threatening email to Tara. So both of these two individuals are actually involved in the founding of Israel Now. Israel Now is really just Jewish Defense League rebranded as with a Canadian brand and a Canadian name. Part of it is to kind of cover up the fact that he's Jewish Defense League and he's a Zionist, but actually Meir Weinstein himself will post videos in support of Meir Kahane. He was a rabbi that was actually so racist that even the Jewish Knesset, which is allowing the most vile, rabid, pro-genocidal stuff happening right now in the Knesset, even that Knesset threw him out for racial incitement. So you have that kind of a figure founding an organization, Jewish Defense League. It gets branded as a terrorist organization because of what happened with the killing of somebody in the United States. And then comes to Canada, has a chapter in Canada, gets closed down, and then it's rebranded as Israel Now.
Okay.
One thing to let you know about Israel Now, just to understand the mindset of the people that created this site, Meir Kahane and Gary Branfman, to understand why they elected to use these kind of tactics against Tara, is they actually consider these protests, just protesters, as people that you gather intelligence on, as in like adversaries in a war. They're considered like military adversaries in their minds. They even have a page on their site called, and that is quite literally them just talking about student protesters, and pro-Palestine protesters in general. These are who they consider people that are adversaries to the point where intelligence reports are needed. So that just gets you in your mind. You understand exactly why they've elected to use these kind of tactics against that.
We are on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM, and streaming at www.coopradio.org. And we're speaking with Martad on a few articles that he has written, and we will post up the links to them for listeners who are interested in reading them on their own. We're talking about doxing of Palestinian protesters in Canada, and how, or sort of the structures that are in play that inform both the communities and police and other authorities around individuals and their activities. So in this, we've talked about Israel Now, and who is Melissa Landsman, somebody you bring up in the article, and then let's connect the dots between Shomrim, which is a self-described neighborhood watch, an international vigilante Zionist organized chapters across US, UK, and Canada. And what is the connection, or who is Melissa Landsman? And then let's triangulate the three with Israel Now.
All right, so Melissa Landsman, she's of Jewish origin and is a Zionist. And she is a conservative MP. She's a conservative MP of Thornhill riding. And as a result of her outlook and political perspective, she's pro-Zionist, she is a Zionist, and she's endorsed the invocation and the founding of Shomrim Toronto. So Shomrim Toronto, she puts her face on it. She's on the front page of the website when you actually go to shomrimtoronto.ca. She's also not above doxing protesters herself, or kind of trying to showcase and embarrass or even expose, in her words, the people that are against Israel's genocide in Gaza or in the West Bank. So she's put her name behind it. She's promoted it, Shomrim, and she's always finding herself in pictures and associating herself with unsavory figures in the Zionist community, as you would, if you can call it a community. So that's kind of like the political reality, is that it gets political backing. Shomrim gets political backing by the state in its own way. If an MP feels confident enough to promote this project, then it means that the state at least allows a political position on it that's favorable. So that's kind of the implications. And what it ends up meaning for many of the people that are going to be victims of spying of this Shomrim. Now, to understand the members of Shomrim and the members that Melissa Landsman is associating with, many of them former Jewish Defense League members, Israel Now members, and former members of the Israeli Defense Forces. So it's a very sophisticated security apparatus. And their association with Israel Now, they openly say campaigns and intelligence reports on protesters. So they're saying themselves what this is about. They say it's about protecting the Jewish community and doing patrols, but ultimately what this ends up meaning is it ends up being a tool for the far right and even the security state apparatus to deal with opposition to the colonial project of Israel.
So then talk to us about how these activities by these groups and individuals then rotate into or cycle into the Canadian state apparatus. Can you shed more light on that?
Well, yes. Like if you think about it, the members of Shomrim, some of them are former IDF members, and these members will have a Canadian citizenship, Israeli citizenship. They'll join the IDF and they'll come back, which is supposedly against foreign enlistment. Supposedly against it. But that's being allowed, and we'll talk a little bit about how that's being investigated against by lawyers. But that connection with the state actually ends up becoming very apparent just on the fact that it's IDF members, Israeli Defense Force members, that primarily make up Shomrim, that Melissa Lensman is endorsing. So, these individuals have actually acted very dangerously in protest and have actually acted very violently towards protesters. One even pulled a knife on a protester and was howling racial slurs, or basically what would be characterized as hate speech according to Canadian laws, but was not punished for that by the local police, who have an association and a partnership with Shomrim. So it is that bad. They're that deep in it. It's that connected. It's that linked together.
What does this then, what message or what does this signal now for free speech, generally speaking, in Canada, but especially for those currently who are pro-Palestinian and are organizing public outrage and supporting protesters? What kind of, or have you got a sense of how this is being played out into this community?
So I think people would have been better prepared for how the situation would develop now if they had kind of a better class understanding of the state. Because if they had a better class understanding of the state and the Canadian state's repressive history, they would have understood from the very beginning that these universal values of free speech don't actually exist. They don't actually exist. The state is an instrument of class rule, and it's there to enforce the ideology of the class that rules it. And if it serves the interests of the class that rules it, or if it doesn't get in a way of a fundamental interest of the ruling class, then they'll support it. Otherwise, they'll go against it. The state will go against it. And it doesn't matter supposed rights you have written on a founding document. Because even in Nazi Germany, they had rights of free speech and everything on their founder document. So it doesn't actually mean anything from a practical standpoint. You have to look at class considerations. You have to look at financial interests, monetary interests, the relationship that Canada has as a colonial state with the Israeli state to understand how things are going to develop. So those that want to advocate for Palestinian rights, for pro-Palestine, need to be more aggressive in enforcing their rights if they're going to do that. And they need to have that inherent understanding of the state in their mind, and advocate appropriately. My suggestion would be always take a maximalist approach in your negotiating, in your demands, or whenever you're doing, and make sure that whatever you do has enough teeth that it forces the state to bargain. So you have to be very militant in what you're doing. If you are consciously aware of the fact that you are going against the underlying ruling class's interests. So that's my understanding of it based on my history of Marxist analysis, Marxist studying of the state, particularly the Canadian ones. Because if you believe that you can just do things in a civil society sort of way, or act in a sort of way where you believe your rights are going to be preserved and protected, the people that you're going up against, for example, in this Shomri, they're backed by an MP, and basically that means that the state in some way sanctions it. It also means that the state is advocating for and protecting underlying interests when it comes to Israel, both on an ideological standpoint and a material standpoint. It benefits NATO to have Israel there. And it benefits NATO even to have Israel ethnically cleanse Gaza entirely. So people need to be aware of that this genocide, as horrifying as it is and as bad as the optics as it is actually in NATO's interests and by extension in Canada's interests.
So yeah,
you need to take a maximalist approach. You need to take a maximalist approach in everything you do, in your tactics, and in how you try to achieve your objectives if you are advocating against this genocide.
Okay, so just as we end this segment, as we end this conversation around this doxing and the both the institutional and community support for these kinds of measures, contrast that with what we saw with MP Sarah Jama. In the sense of what community, how, and what was the response in juxtaposition to what we just talked about right now, in terms of how protesters can navigate all of the complexities. I just want to hear your thoughts on that in contrast.
Well, you'll find different examples. Sarah Jama is an MP, and she's finding herself saying that the Ontario government is fascist. So she's found herself saying that in response to how they've treated this cafe issue and how they've treated the Palestine issue in general. So that actually ends up reaffirming what I've been saying about the issues in general.
Mm-hmm.
I think Sarah Jama, she's been censored on a regular basis, even while she was when she was a member of the NDP.
Mm-hmm.
They forced her to take down a tweet, and I believe Yves Engler was the one who wrote on the Canada Files.
Sure.
About Sarah Jama being forced to take down a tweet.
And now it's moved on to kafeas, right? Now it's moved on as well to kafeas as being symbols that the Ontario legislature, the speaker at least, is threatened by, and other MPs.
So he's not trying to say that he's threatened by. I mean that's not the pretext he's going to give, because many people would just call him out explicitly for being racist. He's saying that it's a political symbol.
Right.
Political symbols unallowed in a political setting. Now, that's his argument. And I think he also did a vote, which was a vocal vote, and in which none of the votes were recorded in order to try to reaffirm his position, Fed Arnott, I believe. So it was like this whole cafe issue, even just doing something symbolic against the genocide by Israel is being reacted to in a particularly vicious manner by the more right-wing and open sections of the state. Because as you can see, the right wing is more militant about defending the interests of the ruling class. The left wing has to, present some sort of illusions. But they essentially both do the same thing. It's just that the right wing is more open about it. And that's what you end up seeing, particularly in the Ontario legislature.
Mm-hmm. Marthad, let's switch gears. Actually, it's almost a dovetail. The next segment I wanted to speak with you about is another article that you wrote titled "The War Measures Act and Pro-Palestinian Protesters Are About to Get an Unwelcome Introduction." And this article is coming off of comments by Warren Kinsella and other writers in the Canadian media who are calling on the Canadian government to play the Emergency Act in order to dismantle Palestinian protests in Canada. Give us the context around that. Who are Warren Kinsella and as you said in the article, a group of other, you named them, in the Canadian media who are calling on the government to enact the Emergencies Act in order to curtail Palestinian protesters? Can you talk to us about that?
So Warren Kinsella, Toronto Sun writer, he made a lot of misrepresentations about what was going on in the protest. Some of his lies include saying that there were firebombing businesses and places of worship. I don't remember a single Palestinian activist doing that, even to a synagogue. Shooting up day schools. That definitely didn't happen. Attacks on police. No, they were attacked by police. They were the victims of police repression. And then attacks on government officials, which the only thing I saw happen was they interrupted Justin Trudeau's dinner, for example, and shamed him for financially supporting the genocide. So that's not attacking physically a government official. This was just a list of some of the things that he wanted to say in order to justify. He compared basically the military uprising of the Front Liberation Quebec to this these campus sit-ins. So these campus sit-ins and basically these encampments have been compared to Front de Libération de Québec. exaggerated comparisons like that are common, particularly in right-wing media. And he's just one example. Mayor Weinstein did the same thing. He's calling them enemies, calling them people subjects for intelligence reports, like military adversaries, that kind of extreme point of view. You have, of course, who tried to say that there was a legal justification for the War Measures Act. And his way of doing it was by trying to point out legislation concerning advocations for terrorism, like in the criminal code. So I ended up having basically section 83.18, subsection 1. But that actually defines what participating is. And nothing that the pro-Palestine protesters have done qualifies as participating. Because you would have to actually be under the payroll of Hamas, based on the threshold written in the law, to be qualified as participating. And I actually point out what the rest of that law is and how it's actually explicitly defined. And this is just another example. And you don't just see it from independents and conservatives. You even see Marco Mendicino, who has already used extreme legislation like the Emergencies Act, which wasn't actually necessary for the convoy to round up people in the convoy and clear out that protest. You didn't even need the Emergencies Act for it, but he invoked it, and we actually. I think I was in the party, the Communist Party of Canada at the time, and we had found out that at the time that Marco Mendicino invoked that Emergencies Act, they were using it on protests in BC, like pro-Indigenous protests in DC. So actually, that was kind of a pilot program for what they're calling for now, the War Measures Act. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So those were the individuals that were basically saying, let's use the army on these protesters.
You further go on in the article and mention some other people, Victor David Hansen and Tasha Keraiden. What is the connection with them?
Well, I mean, they've basically, for their part, they weighed in and talked specifically on the protests that have in this new protest action, which is the encampments, that has inspired this call for the War Measures Act and this call for using more and concentrated state repression. So there's Dr. David Hansen. He's like a right-wing intellectual, and he has a very generous attitude towards students. He basically wants to use the state up to the point where, he's under the impression that the people that are advocating against genocide, by and large, are just students from a privileged background that'll buckle at the slightest case of resistance. He calls them crybaby protesters. What I'm trying to say is they will. It is not him saying that he doesn't want to use measures all the way to the end. It's basically him just saying that if we do enough to make sure that their lives come to their stop, that their futures come to a stop, then it'll be enough to quell this protest entirely. What we're trying to do is put an end to their futures. Let us put an end to their careers, put an end to their progress, put an end to their learning opportunities, and that'll be enough to put an end to these protests. Tasha Harridan also wants, in particular, she wants a more comprehensive form of laws to make what is being said in these protests legal. So in essence, Tasha Harridan also, like Kevin Wong, wants the law to be in favor of a brutal crackdown of these protests.
And just for context, who is Tasha, just for context again?
Well, yeah, Tasha Harridan, she's a writer for the National Post. So I call her a far-right writer. She's a regular contributor to the National Post.
Okay, fair enough. Uh-huh.
Yes. Yeah, she's obviously, even in the article, she kind of admits that she's always being compared to a colonialist. And she's found herself trying to push back against these kind of comments against her on a regular basis because of the way she writes and because of what kind of material she writes. I say if you're going to write that kind of material, you should be prepared for that kind of criticism. But it is what it is. So, yeah, that's basically kind of what the thinking is that there's a growing consensus among the right-wing intellectuals, the right-wing media, the right-wing intelligentsia to use as much of the state as is necessary to crack down on these protests. So that's kind of the point that I'm trying to make.
Right.
When I involve these two people, yeah.
Yes. And your research has pointed to these activities occurring in other countries as well, like the United States and the UK. Do you find that this is a similar approach and a similar tactic? Are these entities also existing there in lock and key in the way that you've described it here in Canada?
Well, like a state, a colonial state, a capitalist state will welcome anything that aligns with its interests. It'll welcome partners. So that's why they'll welcome, far-right figures from World War II, for example, Nazis from Ukraine, why they will welcome Nazis from Hungary, Nazis from Lithuania, Estonia, and bring them all here because they form the ideological justification and basically the community and the resources necessary for the state to repress. So, for example, Shomrim is a welcome addition to Canada because they support Israel, they support that colonial project, and contrary to any sort of rhetoric that is said openly by NATO, they do not support a two-state solution. They support a one-state solution, an Israel solution, complete colonization, complete ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians. So, because of that, yes, they welcome Shomrim. Yes, they welcome members of the Jewish Defense League. Yes, they welcome IDF soldiers. And yes, they welcome Zionists and intellectual Zionists. So it's it's understanding the fundamental nature of a capitalist colonial state that'll help you to understand why they've given a warm welcome to figures like this. It connects in this way. I believe that the Marxist analysis of the state is the most correct one. And when I do this research and I look into how the state has behaved, in particular in reaction to this uprising by people against a genocide in the Middle East, it ends up reaffirming the Marxist analysis of the state.
Where can listeners follow your work?
Oh, yeah. Just keep looking at the Canada Files. I think the vast majority of my articles are written there. I think I've only done one other article, Itikadi, for the Communist Party of Kenya. So I did one article for Itikadi. I'm not sure where it was published, but yeah, they have a regular publication that releases articles on a regular basis. So maybe every now and then they'll have me write something, particularly on what's happening in the Great Lakes region. But yeah, you can find my stuff there. You can find my stuff. Yeah, mainly the Canada Files.
TheCanadaFiles.com. Yeah, TheCanadaFiles.com. Okay, let's. It is really like a pleasure speaking with you after reading your work over the last little while. I mean, I find your work pretty detailed and insightful. So, I mean, listeners can have their own opinions after reading and following. I wanted to chug along here and stay on this topic and shift gears again with another article that you wrote titled "Canadians with Families in Gaza Serve Canadian Government with Notice of Intention to Prosecute." And this is the Legal Center for Palestine as well as Hameed Law, which are representing Canadian families or Canadians who have family in Gaza. Talk to us about this article and what's going on here.
Oh, yes. So I believe it was in November.
Yes,
so
that's right. November 23rd was when the press release came out.
Yes. November 23rd. And the Hameed Law, Legal Center for Palestine, issued a notice of intent to prosecute on a number of issues. For example, one of the things I mentioned a little earlier was allowing Israel, double citizenship, people with joint citizenship with Canada and Israel, or maybe permanent residents with Israeli citizenship, to join in the IDF in violation of the Foreign Enlistment Act. And then, of course, you have JTF-2 special forces soldiers within Gaza. So, in the context of, any viewers that have listened have actually seen examples of the atrocities committed by the IDF. Know that there are Canadian soldiers in Gaza, and they might be complicit directly in those atrocities. And that's actually something that the two law firms are investigating. You see, Operation Prosperity Guardian, which was basically the operation against the blockade on the Red Sea by the Houthis. So actually that could be used in a legal argument against the NATO partners. And because Houthis, you could argue on international law, are fulfilling their obligations under the Geneva Conventions and under international law of preventing genocide. So you have an obligation to prevent genocide.
Right.
So you are obstructing or directly militarily opposing an operation like the Houthis have launched on the Red Sea to prevent a genocide, then you are also, in that sense, you might be complicit in genocide. So that's actually being investigated as well.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of laws domestically against genocide, of course. The Crimes Against Humanity and War Crimes Act. The Genocide Convention 1948 is actually explicitly mentioned as a reference to define genocide. It should be understood by the audience, actually, that enabling, supporting genocide, being complicit in genocide is the same. It's the same as actually participating in genocide. They're both treated legally as the same thing. There's no distinction between one or the other. They're both equally heinous. And that was something that I actually, there's also an interview of this with the Legal Center for Palestine lawyer that you can find online on YouTube. And when I asked him about this, just to confirm, he said yes, legally they're the same thing. So anybody that supports the actions of Israel, by the way, or even voices support. So it's not the same as the basically the anti-terror laws in the criminal code. Genocide is a whole other game. Enabling being complicit ends up meaning even voicing support for Israel's actions, if they're deemed to be genocide. So anybody in Canada who has publicly voiced support for Israel's actions falls under this category. So this is another thing to consider. But those are kind of it's just a short summary of everything that they are actually investigating and everything that they're looking into. So you'll see it's a very serious investigation. They're taking it very seriously, and the lawyers themselves know what they're getting into. When you see the interview that I've done with the Legal Center for Palestine, he anonymized himself. So you see the logo for Legal Center for Palestine, basically like a picture of the letter LCP, but you do not, or LP, but you do not see his name or any affiliation or who he actually is. There's going to be serious reprisal if the members, if the lawyers are kind of revealed about who they are and who's involved in this attempted prosecution against the government of Canada, and which will be coming soon, in about a month or two. We'll see. They've said they were going to investigate for about 6 months, and we'll see pretty soon what the findings of their investigation are going to be. Everything up until this point, it doesn't matter what kind of corrective actions Canada has done now. The damage was already done on November 23rd when they issued their notice to prosecute. At that point, when I had asked them about that, if the government could do anything to try to prevent any sort of redress or any sort of legal action against Canada, they had said no, too much has already happened. For example, a Palestinian one of their clients had actually lost their entire extended family in Gaza. So there's not a single family member left. So it's already too much. So just letting everybody know that this is probably the most serious out of many legal actions against Canada that have already been launched.
Yes, indeed. You are still listening to CFRO 100.5 FM and streaming at www.coopradio.org. We are speaking with Hameed Umucyaba. How do you say your last name? I'm so sorry.
Umucyaba.
Yeah, Umucyaba. Right. Who writes mostly for the Canadian Files and other publications as well. You can follow them easily by checking the canadianfiles.com. Before I let you go, first of all, I would like to thank you again for taking this time out, for doing the writing that you have, and then for speaking with us. We are talking to you from Hong Kong, and where you are also doing a variety of things, including you are also a host of a radio show called The Socially Radical Guitarist. Can you just leave us with a little bit around that and where listeners can pick up this radio show?
The radio show, you can watch old episodes up until I think episode 21 and 22 of the second season. I've accepted Islam, and there are prohibitions on certain types of music in Islam, and I accepted it about a year ago. So I've been a Muslim for just over a year now, and as a result of that, I am going to try to do a radio show again, but it's going to have a different topic. But if you do want to see older episodes and older topics where I've discussed radical views and my radical outlook, you can watch episodes at sociallyradicalguitars.com. So it's a website I actually personally built myself, so you can take a look at it, see old episodes, and see even some of the tracks if you support listening to music that I used for each episode, and to kind of make an expose on what was happening with Western culture and its relation to class.
Right.
So that was basically the main essay of the show.
Right.
Actually.
Great. I know. I mean, I'm absolutely certain that listeners will want to follow that up, as we will as well. We look forward to catching up with you down the road as your articles are coming. You write about a vast variety of things, all related to culture, race, and across continents as well. I know that you also focus in on Africa. You've written about the Uyghurs in China, and so on. So it would be a pleasure to reach you again and talk about some of your other articles.
Oh yeah, for sure. I really did like this, and I do hope that you will give me a chance to kind of basically reiterate the conclusion that I made on the War Measures Act, because I do talk about a lot of topics and a lot of international topics, but you'll find that all of them are interlinked and interrelated. And what I've looked at when you're talking about these pro-Palestine protests,
yes.
a lot of them had I had some constructive criticisms for some of the tactics that they used about in dealing with the international situation. For those that actually support Palestinians engaging in armed struggle against colonialism, for example, there was a lot of criticism against Iran that was actually used by Israel, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And there was with Russia, when Russia was compared to Israel in the special military operation, even though their conduct hasn't even been the same, regardless of whether you even support or oppose the special military operation in the beginning, that the conduct was nowhere near the same in their prosecution of that war with Israel and how they treated the Palestinians. But that comparison ended up making the Russian diaspora in Canada very quiet about the Palestine issue. And that's understandable. The one thing I want to make clear is that this NATO military alliance is actually, in essence, a political party with an organized party line and an organized. It has joint statements, it has issued statements, kind of G7, NATO, that sort of thing. They have a very concerted and disciplined goal of trying to impose their hegemony on the rest of the world. So in order to combat that, you need to be disciplined and organized yourselves. And you need to look very carefully at what is going on, what's being read, what's being looked at. These Uyghur independence activists right now are pro-Israel. They're pro-Israel. And if people had made that comparison, right now, they would have been completely ignorant to the fact that China actually legally argued for Palestine's right to engage in armed struggle at the International Court of Justice.
Right, it did do that, didn't it? And despite that, it played the double standard that it has with the Uyghurs itself, I would imagine.
Yeah. So the ones advocating for East Turkestan are Zionists. When Hamas launched their operation on October 7th, they issued a public denunciation and asked for support for Israel. So that's the World Uyghur Congress. Basically, the arm. So people need to be very, very, very cognizant of the international political situation, the international political environment, and to take, if you're going to have an objective of ending a genocide that is in the interest of NATO, you need to take a maximalist stance. So when I said that at the beginning, that actually ends up meaning be completely on the other end of NATO's wishes and objectives. Yeah.
No, I can see where you're going, because really the world is upside down, isn't it? And we were told of this a while ago. So flipping it over and looking at that way does make sense in understanding the wider scape.
Yes. NATO openly advocates for free markets, in other words, capitalism. So it's an organization explicitly about advocating for and maintaining capitalism. It was founded by, its first leader, Adolf Hitler, was a Nazi. It had many Nazi members, many separatists joined into it. Ukraine, with basically a Banderas government, wants to join NATO. Argentina was Javier Milei elected, who's also himself has been implicated with a lot of far-right Nazi-related groups in Argentina. They want to join NATO, so it ends up telling you a lot. And people are going to have to really look at the international situation and take a maximalist view if they want to see things actually fundamentally change.
Well, Martard, we're going to have to leave it there. Once again, thank you so much for taking this time out. Listeners can follow your work at thecanadianfiles.com, and we look forward to speaking with you as we go down the road.
Thanks for having me, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion, and I hope I didn't ramble on too long, but yeah.
No, we did. It's very nice of you to get in depth in terms of what you had written and talk a little bit more about that. And it is appreciated very, very much. Thank you again.
All right. Thank you for having me.
You take care. So we still are here on unceded Coast Salish territories, and we are going to be now shifting over